Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, July 14th, 2017. It's Bastille Day, and the French are relieved that Donald has left. As I do on Fridays, I am live on Facebook, feeding a live video at Peter B. Collins' show page. And I hope you're able to find that and follow along. Coming up on the half hour, Bill Binney will join me. He was the technical director of the NSA, and he's one of the sources who has helped stoke my own skepticism about the Rachel Maddow and Democratic-driven Trump-Russia narrative. And fundamentally, the issue of whether the initial purloining of data from the DNC was a hack or a leak is very critical. And Bill Binney will weigh in on that and a new forensic study that was posted earlier this week. But we begin with the hearing that Washington largely ignored. On Wednesday, Trump's appointee to head the Federal Bureau of Investigation for a 10-year term, Christopher Wray, went before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And while there were a couple of tough questions asked, our Senator Dianne Feinstein from here in California peppered him with questions on torture, and he did respond that he doesn't think torture works, he doesn't think it's legal or moral, and that he, for one, would not be involved in that and would not involve the FBI in that. And there were some other, Lindsey Graham peppered him with questions in the manner of California Senator Kamala Harris, who got tweaked by John McCain and others because she was so persistent with Jeff Sessions and with other people who have come before her committee. And Lindsey Graham interrupted Wray several times and then basically said, you're a good guy and you're going to get confirmed. But this is a critical mistake. The Senate committee should be grilling Christopher Wray for hours on end, because in my view, the FBI has been and remains a rogue agency. It operates above the law. And the last two directors, Comey and Mueller, were confirmed with rubber stamps. And that's what's happening with Chris Wray. And as you know, I have many beefs with the FBI. The abuse of national security letters, the frame-ups of alleged suspects of domestic terrorism. The most recent was reported in the news the same day that Christopher Wray was testifying for his confirmation as FBI director. The story comes from Honolulu, a mentally troubled veteran who had numerous, as many as 5, FBI agents and paid informants working on him. Ultimately, he went with one of them to buy a drone that he was going to send to Syria for the Islamic State to use, and then they got him to pledge allegiance to al-Baghdadi. And then they popped him. And as Trevor Aronson has reported, this has gone on over and over hundreds of times. Nearly 800 cases, most of which are tainted by a paid FBI informant and a setup. And we haven't seen any issues raised related to the way FBI agents will sometimes threaten somebody to cooperate or will put you on the no-fly list. That kind of arrogant and abusive behavior, without any oversight, without accountability, is what, in my view, has made the FBI a rogue agency. Blithely, the senators are willing to just allow it to continue under a new director. Oh, sure, they got him to say that he didn't give a loyalty oath to Trump and that if Trump asked him to do something illegal, Wray said, well, first I'd try to talk him out of it, and then if he persisted, I would resign. But that doesn't cover the details of this massive law enforcement agency that has been muscled up since 9/11. Well, on his way back from Paris, or perhaps it was on the way over, Donald Trump allowed reporters into his suite in Air Force One And he gave us a dose of his stream of consciousness. And boy, is it scary. Well, what we learned is that, he answered some questions about his conversation with Putin at the Hamburg G20 summit last week. And he reprised the questions that he asked Putin about the alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 elections. I said to him, "Were you involved in the meddling in the election?" He said, "Absolutely not. I was not involved." He was very strong on it. I then said to him again in a totally different way, "Were you involved with the meddling?" He said, "I was not. Absolutely not." Now, if that is the sum total of what Trump asked Putin, given what our intelligence agencies have claimed, given the media firestorm that has continued month after month, well, that's hardly pressing Putin. It appears to be setting him up to answer the question the way Trump had hoped he would answer. What I said, I asked him, "Were you involved?" He said very strongly. Said to him a second time, totally different. "Were you involved?" Because we can't let that happen. And I mean, whether it's Russia or anybody else, we can't let there be even a scintilla of doubt when it comes to an election. Scintilla. That's an addition to his limited vocabulary, I think. On allegations of collusion with Russia. Hey, now it's shown. There's no collusion. There's no obstruction. There's no nothing. Honestly, the whole thing, it's really a media witch hunt. It's been a media witch hunt. And it's bad for the economy. So then he asked and answered the question that was on his mind that he forgot to ask Putin. And that was, did you really want me to win instead of Hillary? And so, again, his rambling discourse. So I was going to, if Hillary got in, your energy prices right now would be double. You'd be doing no fracking. You'd be doing practically no fossil fuels. Now, I don't know what that's based on. That's just some imaginary theory, because Hillary never opposed fracking, and she, supported the Keystone XL pipeline until it became politically untenable. He went on to say, because Russia makes its money through selling of oil, and we've got underneath us more oil than anybody, and nobody knew it until 5 years ago, and I want to use it. I don't want that taken away by the Paris Accord. I don't want them to say all of that wealth that the United States has under its feet, but that China doesn't have and other countries don't have, we can't use. Now, that's a pretty revealing explanation of why he wants to exit the Paris Climate Accords and why he wants to drill, baby, drill. We have a tremendous advantage, he says. We have more natural resources under our feet than any other country. Let me check under my feet here. No oil there. Anyway, but think of it. If Hillary is there, you're going to have a far less amount of fuel. Therefore, energy prices will be much, much higher. That's great for Russia. Now, this belies that Trump presides over the lowest price for a barrel of oil in recent history. It's still at $45 or so. And that's the bottom line why the Russian economy and the Venezuelan economy are in trouble. And so Trump really often exposes his ignorance as he tries to prove how smart he is. And to our Facebook viewers, yes, the autofocus on the iPad that I'm using to launch the video from here is getting fuzzy at times, and it could be when I raise the paper and it sees the paper. I'll try to keep that in check, okay? So then somebody asked him about the border wall and if it's really going to be a solar wall. He said, yeah, there's a very good chance we can do a solar wall, which would actually look good. But there's a very good chance we could do a solar wall. One of the things with the wall is you need transparency. You have to be able to see through it. In other words, if you can't see through that wall, so it could be a steel wall with openings, but you have to have openings because you have to see what's on the other side of the wall. Oh, really? You just thought of this? And then he has this bizarre example. As horrible as it sounds, when they throw the large sacks of drugs over, and if you have people on the other side of the wall, you don't see them. They hit you on the head with 60 pounds of stuff. It's over. Now, how many people are strolling along the southern border, blindsided by Trump's massive, beautiful wall, and they get hit by a bag of marijuana or a kilo of cocaine that somebody threw over. I mean, it's just bizarre. Anyway, then he backtracked and basically said that he's not going to build a wall across the entire southern border, maybe 700 to 900 miles. Plus, we have some wall that's already up that we're already fixing. You know, we've already started the wall because we're fixing large portions of wall right now. We're taking wall that was good, but it's in very bad shape, and we're making it new. We're fixing it. It's already started. So we've actually, in the true sense, you know, there's no reason to take it down or... I tried to read that verbatim. It must be difficult without, I guess you've got to use a recorder to capture this guy because you can't write down what he says. It goes by too fast. Yesterday, based on an account from The Hill, the political publication based in Washington, I reported to you that Loretta Lynch, the second Obama Attorney General, had personally approved the travel approval, the what was called immigration parole, for the Russian lawyer whose name is Veselnitskaya. And that's not easy to pronounce, but I got through it that time. Anyway, fact-checking by the New York Times and by BuzzFeed indicates that, in fact, it would have been the Department of Homeland Security that issued the immigration parole. And Veselnitskaya got several passes to come into the country because of a lawsuit that she was working on, a Russian defendant in a New York court, and the request came from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Now, Loretta Lynch has denied having any knowledge of, quote, Ms. Veselnitskaya's personal travel. Now, that's a curious denial because she could say, I wasn't involved in any way, I didn't approve it, it was not brought to me. But instead, we get this kind of very careful statement that appears to be denial, but not quite clear. And yesterday, I wasn't sure how Veselnitskaya was permitted in the country for the June 2016 meeting because the emails that were received by Donnie Trump Jr. indicated that she had just arrived in the country on June 8th. And it turns out she was issued a B-1, B-2 non-immigrant visa by the Department of State. Now that begs the question, why was she denied a visa in the past and had to go for the special treatment of immigration parole? Everything we get leads to a new question. This is a real curious one. Yesterday we learned that 81-year-old Peter Smith killed himself shortly after he gave that interview to the Wall Street Journal where he admitted that he had been working on an independent expenditure campaign on behalf of Donald Trump and that he had solicited Hillary Clinton's emails from hackers, presumably including Russian hackers. Now, he left a suicide note saying there was no foul play whatsoever. He had had a recent bad turn in health. He killed himself in a hotel or motel room close to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which will not confirm or deny that Smith was a patient there. But this is curious, and it raises more questions than it answers, like so many of these things. And speaking of Hillary Clinton's emails, Judicial Watch, the right-wing group that has been on the trail of those emails all along and has filed many lawsuits, they revealed today that new emails that were sought and obtained from Huma Abedin, the wife once upon a time of Anthony Weiner and Hillary Clinton's right-hand gal, that there were at least 6 Clinton email exchanges that were not previously turned over, bringing to the known total to date to at least 439. And so the effort to get Hillary Clinton's emails, these were the official ones from the State Department, it took a long time, and there were many barriers thrown up. And we learned that there was back-channel chatter between Doug Band, who was running the Clinton Foundation for Bill Clinton, telling Huma Abedin that she needs to show love to the CEO of Dow Chemical. Band also asked for special treatment on some immigration issues and for meetings for people who had been big donors to the Clinton Foundation. This is the pay-to-play that is significant, it is actionable, And yet many people, particularly Hillary Clinton supporters, just say, there's nothing there. You know, the whole email thing was another one of these damn nothing burgers. And nothing burger is the most abused English language word of the week, in my opinion. If you're watching on Facebook, I apologize for the fuzzy video there. It's a result of the camera that I'm using today, and I'll see what I can do about that in our upcoming video feeds. And coming up on the half hour, I'm going to be talking with Bill Binney, the former NSA technical director, and we're going to delve into some of the technical issues of whether the DNC was hacked or was breached by an insider leak. Now, at the center of the recent revelations about Don Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russian contact, the offer to get dirt on Hillary Clinton from Russian officials, well, one of the murky groups that's in the middle of all this is called Fusion GPS. They're the people who hired Christopher Steele, first when they were working for Republican clients during the primary, and Jeb Bush or somebody else like Ted Cruz, he or one of his supporters were paying for the opposition research on Donald Trump. And when Trump secured the nomination, a Democratic funder stepped up, we're told, in June of last year and kept paying Fusion GPS to continue Christopher Steele's work in developing this opposition research. And yesterday we told you about Bill Browder, the American millionaire, who is at the center of the Magnitsky Act. And the Magnitsky Act imposed sanctions on Russia for alleged human rights abuses of this man named Magnitsky. And now it's an open question as to whether the Magnitsky Act that was signed into law by President Obama was based on accurate information. But this same company, Fusion GPS, all right, running the intelligence gathering for first opponents of Trump on the Republican side, then somebody aligned with Hillary Clinton, we're still not sure who. Fusion GPS was also working for the Russian government, lobbying to either change the name of the Magnitsky Act or get it repealed outright. And that's what Velikin, the Russian lawyer, was in the United States doing. Now, did she gild the lily with a teaser handed off through this guy, Rob Goldstone, to Don Trump Jr. that she has delicious dirt on Hillary? That's an open question. But to people who believe that the case for impeachment was cinched this week, as Rachel Maddow declared several times on her program the last few nights, not so fast. Now, I want you to consider the source. The Daily Caller is a pro-Trump online media outlet, but they revived coverage from Politico, which is not in Trump's pocket. Politico published this in January, showing that the Clinton campaign hired a veteran DNC operative named Alexandra Chalupa. That reminds me of a Taco Bell commercial. I can't help myself. Chalupa worked with Ukrainian government officials and journalists from Ukraine and the U.S. to dig up Russia-related opposition research on Trump and on Paul Manafort. And you may recall, you've heard about how there was a ledger that showed Paul Manafort received $12 million for his campaign work for Yanukovych in Ukraine. Well, I suspect that came from Chalupa. The Politico report says that the DNC encouraged Chalupa to arrange an interview with the Ukrainian President Poroshenko to talk to their ambassador to gather information, and Chalupa frequently briefed members of the DNC and the Clinton campaign about the information that she got from Ukrainians. I think both campaigns were pushing the legal envelope wherever they could. Now, a lot of people I know and like think that Donald Trump should be impeached forthwith. And I'd love to see Trump ejected from the White House. There's just no doubt about that. But Trevor Timm adds some rational thought to this today, and I've linked to his commentary in the podcast show file that'll be online at peterbcollins.com. And he points out that while there was this week the first actual piece of evidence, Don Trump Jr.'s emails, that most of what we're seeing is still based on anonymous leaks and documents and information that are secret. So we have no public evidence to support this. Anyway, he goes into detail saying that the Mueller special counsel investigation could take years to complete, probably won't directly lead to Trump being indicted. He's likely to submit his findings to Congress, which is controlled by Republicans. And will they proceed to process this toward impeachment? Now, Brad Sherman, Democratic congressman from Sherman Oaks, California, has submitted a bill for impeachment, but it's got a long, long way to go. And here's an email thread that popped up yesterday with my friend Dave Cook. Dave lives in Dallas. He's a retired radio news director. He worked at the network level for major local stations in Los Angeles and San Francisco. And he wrote, "The evidence is clear. Donald Trump's top campaign officials colluded with the Russians to influence the 2016 presidential election. The actions were criminal. The chance that the Donald was unaware what his people were doing, zilch minus zero. Time to get the impeachment proceedings underway and get this traitorous demagogue out of the White House before he does any more serious damage. To leave him in office would be unconscionable." So I responded, "Dave, put your newsman hat back on. The only evidence we've seen is Don Jr.'s email, which is damaging but not proof of your sweeping statement. I want Trump gone as much as anyone, but leaks, secret documents, Rachel's narrative don't amount to evidence." So I asked him to listen to my podcast from yesterday. At first he said, "I will listen, but in all honesty, it'll be with a great deal of skepticism. Fake news originates from the far left as well as the right, between a relatively obscure far left, a few relatively obscure far left writers on the one side, and the whole U.S. intelligence community, the Times, the Post, the Atlantic, the New Yorker, and scores of other great news organizations on the other. My money is on the latter group for accuracy. I'm sure you agree, Peter, that Trump must go, and Russiagate is in all likelihood the one and only vehicle that will get that accomplished." So, Dave, with all due respect, you're arguing that the end justifies the means, and that we must upend our system, trust the intelligence community, in order to eject Trump. So then 16 hours later, he posted, "Okay, I listened. I don't buy your rationale. The preponderance of the evidence increasingly points to Trump campaign involvement with the Russians to defeat Hillary. There are a million ways to skew facts and make them seem unreliable, even when they are. Happens all the time in courtrooms, blah, blah, blah. I believe your arguments are tantamount to failing to see the forest for the trees. You focus on a couple of writers who, for whatever reasons, have decided to defend Trump. No, I focus on people who are looking for facts, evidence, and the truth. And I don't think that's a forest for the trees metaphor. I recognize the consensus position. I simply don't trust the intelligence communities, and I don't buy it." Jason Leopold has a piece at BuzzFeed today about how the CIA Inspector General showed that data was mishandled in 2009, and there was a source code that was vulnerable. They claim they fixed it. The Inspector General, not so sure. This next item is speculative. It's from a single source. I've seen the same report on multiple websites. The headline reads, "CIA agent confesses on deathbed, we blew up World Trade Center Building 7 on 9/11. The man is identified as Malcolm Howard, a 79-year-old retired CIA agent who's been given a short time to live. He was just released from the hospital, and the article claims that as a civil engineer, he became an explosives expert, and that he has confessed that he was a party to the demolition of Building 7. Claims he didn't have anything to do with anything else on 9/11. But if this is true, this could be the first crack in the cover-up that has held for a long, long time now. And I just want to repeat my position. I don't believe the official narrative of 9/11. I don't have a second narrative. I don't have enough evidence to prove any of the various scenarios that have been advanced by truthers. But I fundamentally know that we've been lied to. And I hope that someday we will see the truth. Trump's royal decree travel ban has received a setback. The judge in Honolulu, Derek Watson, had initially said he's not going to challenge the Supreme Court ruling. But he decided that the definition of a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the United States was too vague, and that it didn't include obvious relatives like grandparents. And so he has expanded that definition and ordered the terms to be modified by the State Department. And the terms now include grandparents, and that refugees who have a contract with a bona fide resettlement agency may come to the United States even if they exceed the cap. Well, we've learned that the planet is continuing to heat up. The latest report from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, their annual greenhouse gas index, shows that global emissions increased 40% between 1990 and 2016. But for the first time, the scientists at NOAA, apparently under a gag order from Trump Co., refused to state that it had anything to do with human activity and carbon release. And Governor Jerry Brown he made a very surprise visit to a state Senate committee in Sacramento yesterday to lobby for passage of a pair of bills that will extend California's cap-and-trade system until 2030. And while I don't think that cap-and-trade is really very effective, it is about the only thing going that corporate entities will accept. And what I don't like about this bill that Jerry Brown, you'll hear him in a second here thundering to tell these senators to pass it before he dies, it's a bad bill because it preempts local and regional regulation of pollution. The best example I can offer you is the Chevron refinery just across the bay from me is regulated by a Bay Area air quality district. And they were about to put limits on that refinery. And Jerry Brown's bill would preempt that. Here is the governor hammering the Senate committee that he appeared before yesterday.
Climate change is real. It is a threat to organized human existence. Maybe not in my life. I'll be dead. What am I, 79? Do I have 5 years more? Do I have 10 years more? 15? I don't know. 20? I don't know. I don't even know I want that long. But most of you people, when I look out here, a lot of you people are going to be alive. And you're going to be alive in a horrible situation that you're going to see mass migrations, vector diseases, forest fires, Southern California burning up. That's real, guys. That's what the scientists of the world are saying. So I'm not here about some cockamamie legacy that people talk about. This isn't for me. I'm going to be dead. It's for you. It's for you, and it's damn real. So I just ask you, take it seriously and give us that vote. Now let me...
That's my Governor Moonbeam, and I appreciate his passion. I appreciate his attempt to provide leadership on climate change issues. But he is demagoguing a bill that has serious flaws, and he's hammering the legislators to pass it without any amendments. That's how politics works. Well, if things are working out right now on line one, I've got Bill Binney. Hello, Bill. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thanks for joining me this afternoon. We're on Facebook Live, and we're also recording for my regular podcast, and I appreciate you being available today. Bill, you and I didn't get to talk before this interview, so I'm not sure how you will respond to my question. But earlier this week, someone who calls himself or herself the Forensicator released a new analysis of the metadata found in the files that were released by Guccifer 2.0. And examining that metadata in the simplest terms, the Forensicator determined that the transfer of the data occurred at a very high rate, at 23 megabits per second, and that exceeds the capability of a remote hacker who might have entered the DNC server without authorization. What is your reaction to this study?
Well, I think it just says as an internal leaker. I mean, that's basically what I deduced from the very beginning. I mean, I did that because NSA follows all the packets around the network inside the U.S. and all outside the U.S. So the point is that if anybody transferred data from any server inside the U.S. across any network in the U.S. and externally to some foreign country, NSA would know it. Mm-hmm. And since they clearly didn't say that they had those traces, I mean, it's very clear to me they don't have any evidence of any of that transfer by a hacker. In other words, a hacker would have to come across the network, go into the servers, and pull data out and retrieve it across the network again.
Right.
That to me said that didn't happen.
And have you been able to authenticate the forensicator as a firm or an individual? And have you been able to review this report, and do you find it credible?
I haven't looked into any of that yet. I mean, I haven't had time. I'm busy doing so many other things, including the lawsuit I'm supporting against the government for the violation of constitutional rights of the U.S. citizens. I just filed an affidavit in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals in support of that lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. And so, Bill, I realize that this is consistent with the claims that you have shared with me. I believe the first time we talked about this was last August.
Yes.
And you've been extremely consistent based on your knowledge as the former technical director at the NSA. And your case is that these files would have been, pulled out and shipped out of there on the Internet in packets, and that the NSA has detection capabilities in virtually all networks to discover, where a packet came from, when it passed through a particular gate, and where it ended up. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, NSA has, according to all the records from Edward Snowden and all the material that's been published so far, they have traceroute programs embedded in switches and servers around the world. How about hundreds? I mean, and the whole point is that they wanted to. They're using that, I think, as a way of trying to reconstruct the Tor network as one of the ways of doing that. But that also gives them the knowledge of how the packets move around the network for everybody. And the whole point is that that's a subset of the Treasure Map program, which is where they want to have knowledge of where every device is on the network in the world every minute of the day. Mm-hmm. So they want to track everybody as well as have all the packet data on them.
Now, as you see the corporate media coverage, which continues to assert as fact that Russia hacked the DNC, that Russia was responsible for the capture of John Podesta's emails, and I see this reporting often conflated with the legitimate release of Hillary Clinton's State Department emails that occurred because of lawsuits and the prodding of journalists like Jason Leopold. But as you look at this, Bill, do you see a concerted effort to confuse the American people through this assertion of hacking?
Yeah, of course. It's in my view, it's a disinformation campaign, and that's fundamentally one of the things we had to watch out for internally in NSA when I was there. That disinformation and manipulation was a part of the techniques we tried to watch for in any international by any other international country. So it's a pretty way. It's like the Wizard of Oz. It's a standard human reaction to something you don't want anybody to look at. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. Look over here. So let's keep creating anything we can to look over there and not pay attention to the man behind the curtain. This is standard.
Yeah. And so, Bill, do you believe we'll ever get to the bottom of this? Will there be technical evidence similar to this report from the forensicator that is so compelling that they will have to abandon this unproven claim that's based on leaks and anonymous sources that Russia was responsible, particularly for the hack of the DNC?
Well, my problem, of course, fundamentally is there's no basic evidence of anything. They're just words and pontification and speculation on the part of people who would like something to be a certain way. For example, when now they're changing the narrative from hacking to meddling. But see, and I'm going to try to write something up for publication here pretty soon about that, because they're confusing everybody, and people are looking at, well, hacking, meddling, obviously it's the same. We're transitioning without any evidence at all. Hacking simply means people are breaking into your server, your computer, through the network, through your firewalls, through your operating systems, looking at the data you have and either taking it out. That's hacking. If they get in there, they take it out. That's just extracting information, which is I would never classify as meddling. If, on the other hand, as part of the hack, when they're in your system, they plant a virus or a worm or another malicious software, and then go away, that is meddling. So, in other words, we have to have FBI, CIA, or NSA come out and say, here is the packets that this is the kind of packet they put in there, this is the kind of virus, worm, or malicious software that's in there, and this is the kind of thing it does. And here it is. And they have not said that yet.
And Bill, when you look at this objectively, and you look at all of the arguments, the kind of hysteria that has been raised, to me, you have supplied me with the basis to remain skeptical of these narratives that have surfaced and the claims, as I say, that are based on very little evidence. The only real evidence, hard evidence, that has surfaced was released by Don Trump Jr. His email thread that he was willing to take a meeting with somebody who represented that they wanted to pass along information from the Russian government. But when we look at Peter Smith, the Republican donor and operative who was running an independent expenditure effort, he basically, to use James Carville's term, he dragged a $100 bill through a bunch of trailer parks and said, if you've got information on Hillary, if you've got the emails that we think are missing, bring them to us. And there was the implicit offer of payment. Much of this is fairly standard political activity. And I was just sharing with my listeners that the Clinton campaign had an operative who worked with Ukrainian officials, including attempting to interview President Poroshenko to get dirt on Paul Manafort and, by implication, Donald Trump from Ukraine. And so while I am offended by both of these intentions, the cynical side of me knows that this is pretty much business as usual.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I understand too. But there's another point here that needs to be made, I think, with Donald Jr. and his meeting. Mm-hmm. He went there looking for some dirt on Hillary, and he was told that the Russian government was behind it, and yet he got nothing. So doesn't that prove that the Russian government isn't trying to meddle in U.S. U.S. elections?
Well,
isn't that proof that they're not really behind this? Because if they had a meeting and they said they had something, they would produce it. I know the Russians; they would do this. Okay, if they had that, I mean, that's I knew them like the back of my hand. It's pretty clear to me if they said something, they had it, and they wanted to have a meeting to pass it on, they would produce something. And so far, nothing has been produced. So it means to me they weren't involved at all.
Now, Bill, when we look at the recent malware and ransomware deployments of NSA hacking tools that were apparently somehow acquired by the so-called shadow brokers, they attempted to sell them, nobody bought, and so they released them. And to me, this is more evidence, or at least a stronger indication, that the attempts to put the blame on Russia for this alleged hacking really fall flat because we ourselves, the U.S. intelligence community, have deployed malware that appears to be, it leaves attribution to Russian hackers and to the Russian GRU. And so that leaves us really empty-handed and suspecting more and more that insiders in the United States had a role, as opposed to any kinds of bad actors from outside the U.S.
Yeah, that's my interpretation. Initially I suspected people at NSA doing this, but it could have been people at CIA also, or anybody who could get the data or that software from CIA, which they did. With the Vault 7 material, and especially the third iteration of it, where they had a program called Marble, where it did exactly what you were talking about. That it included Cyrillic characters in the code. I mean, no self-respecting spy would ever put something like that in there that would point right back to them. That's just insane. That was a joke. That was to me. That was a CIA bumbling along trying to do something to implicate someone else, and it was just silly.
Yeah.
No self-respecting spy would do that.
Well, and that's why I've always been skeptical of the CrowdStrike, assertions, And when we start to talk about Fancy Bear and Dancing Bear or whatever that other bear was, I mean, that doesn't pass the fundamental grin test.
That's right. And also, I would say that the FBI nor NSA or anybody in the government got the hold of that server to examine it to see how many other people were doing it, or NSA should come out and tell us how many other people, since this stuff has been released openly, how many other people in the world are using this software. I mean, if you expect it just, occasionally to pop up, I think, we're in for a very rough ride with some of the software that's been used recently, affecting hospitals and so on in the UK and all of that. I mean, the software that's been released was hundreds of millions of lines of code, source code. That means thousands and thousands of attack techniques. So all these attack techniques are out there and in the world, and people have them. They can look at them. Anybody that's a hacker could take that and use it anywhere. So, what are we going to do now? I say what we should do now is they take all the vulnerabilities that they know about and NSA know about and tell everybody about them and fix them all so we have cybersecurity, instead of letting us all get attacked and swindling us by saying we need more money for cybersecurity when they know what the problems are and don't fix them.
Now, Bill, you were the first to tell me that the NSA has failed to disclose to people like Microsoft and other producers of software the vulnerabilities, in the so-called zero-day vulnerabilities that are discovered on the release of a new software or software update. And there has been a little criticism of the NSA from leaders at Microsoft, but by and large, the tech community is pretty passive, considering how what you have described to me consistently is that the NSA enjoys the low levels of security present in most American networks and internet systems because it enables them to pop in and out of that back door whenever they want. But we know that if they can get in and out of a back door, so can nefarious hackers.
That's correct. And that's the problem that's we're starting to experience with some of the worms and things that have been released in the public network and spread around the world. So that we should expect a much more rough ride unless NSA and CIA stop with their finite, short-sighted thinking and start fixing the problem so that people have a secure network to work on.
So, Bill Binney, is there anything related to this that I haven't asked you about that you're eager to share with my listeners?
Well, I mean, it's just that it's not just NSA and CIA. I mean, FBI is behind this. Director Mueller, in his testimony or in his interview with Bart Gellman in 2011 in Time magazine, said that he and the FBI had been using the Stellar Wind program since 2001. That Stellar Wind program is the domestic spying program. That's the content and metadata collected on domestic communications, primarily with the Fairview, Stormbrew, and Blarney programs, which are the acquisition programs, the ones where they have the taps on the fiber networks. Mm-hmm. That's where they get the bulk of data. The PRISM program is basically it's a charade. What it is we're going to ask the service providers for data on people we have a warrant for, and then we'll be reviewed by the courts and everything, and everybody will say that's okay. That's up front to make people believe that they're abiding by the law, when in fact the muscular program behind that was unilaterally tapping the lines between the data centers of these service providers and taking everything they had, and they didn't even know it. And so, and plus they were getting all the other data from all the other taps on the fiber network around the United States and the world. So, they've been setting up a charade to make it look like they're doing things that are constitutional and legal, when in fact they've been scrapping the Constitution, doing anything they want with anybody. In fact, you can look up on the web a letter from Jane Harman to the Attorney General under Obama, and where she said she was really angry about having her communications tapped by NSA and CIA,
right? And
she wanted to know, how many more taps of her data they had, and how many other congressional members they were tapping. Well, my answer was all of them, and they have everything. So it's pretty easy to say that, but they'll never admit it publicly and openly because, those are all impeachable activities. They're criminal.
And Bill, the Jane Harmon episode you refer to, The Intercept captured her trying to make a deal with Israeli officials for going easy on the Defense Department leaker, the guy who spied on us, an Israeli agent. And the exchange that Harmon proposed was that they would then lobby Nancy Pelosi to make her chair of the House Intelligence Committee.
That's right. Well, Nancy was she was briefed into all these programs on October 4th of 2001. She was the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee at that time, and she was briefed in by Hayden and Cheney and some of the lawyers they had there, and some other people in there from, I think, NSA. But she was told exactly what they were doing, and she knew it. And the response from Senator Rockefeller when he first got briefed in 2003, he said that the only thing he could think of that was like this program was Admiral Poindexter's TIA program, Total Information Awareness. Mm-hmm. Well, that's everything. Okay, that's all the content and everything. And in fact, if you looked at the Five Eyes report, Five IG report back in 2009, it's at the bottom of page 8, top of page 9. It says Hayden was telling them, General Hayden was telling them that he was being talked. Addington was telling him that the president's order for NSA to collect data domestically included content as well as metadata. And that briefing came around in the middle of November of 2001. So shortly after it was before the first 45-day renewal at that time. So that was he was clarifying the president's order for NSA to collect content as well as metadata. Well, that's how NSA analysts could do love intelligence, because it was all local communications they were collecting as well. So, and it was in there. All their lovers, all their phone calls and email were there. So they went in to see if they were cheating on them. That's how they got that data.
Now, Bill, recently I did another interview with your former NSA colleague Tom Drake and with Salt Lake City former mayor and attorney Rocky Anderson. Yep. And Anderson is carrying a lawsuit that accuses the NSA of total surveillance, dragnet surveillance of the entire Salt Lake area before and during the 2002 Winter Olympics. And Drake has supplied a very strong sworn statement in support of this lawsuit. Now, I know that you were leaving the NSA in the fall of 2001, but were you briefed or in any way aware of the plan for total capture in Salt Lake City?
No, because that came after I left. I was aware of them pulling in all the business records. That's the reason I left, because I knew they were doing that, and it was very clear to me that they were using the program that we developed in the SIGINT Automation Research Center to make it possible to manage that data. I mean, that was the only program they had that could handle things of that magnitude. Mm-hmm. So, and they're still using them, by the way. And I see those programs, and I put all that data in a sworn affidavit for the Third Circuit. This is the 11th Circuit with Rocky Anderson. I was also helping and feeding information to Rocky Anderson too to help him, formulate his complaint.
Yeah.
So I was doing that. I didn't put up an affidavit because I didn't have anything that specifically would apply to that event, the Olympics there. So so I couldn't add to that story. Now Tom was still working at NSA at that time, so he had some basis for making a sworn affidavit in support of that particular lawsuit. I could have put in the general one, like I'm sure they could use my affidavit in the Third Circuit also. So can the EFF and the ACLU if they want to do it in the Second Circuit and the Ninth.
Bill, as I wrap up with you, you mentioned earlier that it's not just the CIA and the NSA, and I appreciate that. I led my podcast today with the yawning confirmation hearing for Christopher Wray, the presumably next FBI director, and I pointed out that Jim Comey had just a cakewalk of a confirmation hearing. Same with Bob Mueller, who was sponsored by Dianne Feinstein, and he just waltzed in there. And, you know, I regard the FBI as a rogue agency. It operates above the law. When an agent kills somebody, the FBI investigates itself and, bats 1,000. They have always exonerated every agent who used force. The abuse of the national security letters, the frame-up of so-called domestic terrorism suspects, the most recent in Honolulu last week. None of these issues are being aired out around the confirmation of this new director who gets a 10-year term unless, of course, he gets fired before then.
That's right. But also nobody's talking about the Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruling national security letters as illegal back in 2015. And that's, as far as I know, has never been challenged by the government because they didn't want it to go to the Supreme Court because if it went there and got, similarly ruled and also called unconstitutional, which it is, then it would have been known nationwide. As far as the Second Circuit, it's, compared like New York, New Jersey, and so on, that area, that limits those who know about that or have the capacity to know. But the rest of the poor suckers out there in the U.S., they don't realize that ruling has been passed. And so when they get a national security letter, they'll abide by it, which is a clear violation of their constitutional rights, which is what the Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled. Mm-hmm. So, my point is they shouldn't be obeying national security letters anywhere in the country, and the FBI shouldn't be issuing them because they know it's unconstitutional. But instead, this is why I refer to them as the Gestapo, because they are becoming a Gestapo police state.
Yeah.
Because they're using NSA-acquired data, illegally acquired, to prosecute people inside the U.S. and put them in jail. I mean, Senator Feinstein, back when it was being challenged in fall of 2013, after the Snowden material came out, she went on there and said, "But this is such a valuable program. We put thousands of people in jail every year for this." Well, I mean, come on. This is a clear violation of how we, as a supposed republic under a constitution, should operate. So I call them the Gestapo.
I don't think that's out of line. I don't think that's over-dramatic or exaggerated, Bill, and I share your concerns about the creeping police state that is evolving here in the United States. Once again, I thank you for your frank commentary, and I've got a lot of great respect for you, Bill, as a real American who's fighting for our constitutional rights.
Well, thank you, Peter.
Great to talk to you, Bill Binney. We'll do it again. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our podcast today and our live Facebook feed. I do apologize for the technical issues on Facebook with the fuzzy camera shot. I'll see what I can do to fix that for next week. And by the way, I'm going to take Monday and Tuesday off. Our next podcast will be right here on Wednesday, the 19th of July. And I'm going to remember the 3 clicks. This podcast will be available on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to